This is the story of Diane Werendowicz, and we're about to play you a real 911 call recorded in 1981. It contains some pretty gruesome details, as does the rest of our story. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is police?
Yes?
I got information on how that girl was killed in Barton Lake.
What's your name?
It's not important.
Okay, what's the information?
She was raped before she was killed. She was wearing blue jeans, a white top, and a red or orange top over top of the white top. Blonde hair, about 5'11". She was found face down in the creek with a tire on top of her shoulders and head.
Yeah?
And that's about all I can tell you. And she was strangled with her purse.
In the summer of 1981, Diane Werendowicz was raped and killed on her way home from a bar. The 911 call you just heard was made 2 days later, and it described her death to a T. Several of the details the caller included has not been made available to the public. Decades later, that recording was played at the court proceedings of Diane's accused killer. But it wasn't until 2016, 35 years after her death, that the full story of that phone call was told in court, including one significant detail that changed everything. It's August 9th, 1981, in the small Canadian city of Hamilton, Ontario. 23-year-old nursing assistant Diane Werendowicz has been invited out to a bar by her coworkers. A quiet person by nature, Diane did not typically enjoy bar atmospheres, which is why she excused herself from the evening early and set off for home on foot. After all, she didn't live far, and this was the 80s, a time before women were regularly informed of dangers lurking in the shadows. The next day, Diane's body was found raped, strangled, and drowned in a creek with a truck tire weighing down her face and neck. Even worse, her body was found by a group of children. Many of the details of the crime were not released to the public, including the positioning of the body and the fact that Diane had been strangled by her purse. So when police received this call 2 days after Diane's death, they knew they were talking to the killer.
And she was strangled with her purse.
Police immediately traced the call. The results of that trace weren't spoken about in a court of law for decades, but it was those results that eventually proved key to convicting Diane Werendowicz's killer. 7 weeks after Diane's death, another young woman was attacked in the same neighborhood. Debbie Robertson was also on a walk home when she was grabbed. It was around 11 o'clock at night. Debbie's attacker had punched her in the mouth, knocked her to the ground, and straddled her as he put his hands in her pants. When Debbie fought him, he stabbed her through the ear with a screwdriver. He stabbed her 4 more times before Debbie played dead, and he abandoned her body. As she was loaded into an ambulance, bleeding heavily and paralyzed on one side, Debbie told the paramedics, "I know him. We went to high school together. Rick or Rob or Russell." At the hospital, Debbie asked the police to bring her high school yearbook. They complied, and she flipped through it until she found the man she was looking for. She pointed at a picture and said, him. The man in that photo was named Robert Badgerow. In 1981, Robert Badgerow was a steel worker in Dofasco. His fiancée told police that she was with him at home the night that Debbie was attacked, and her parents backed up the alibi. In spite of Debbie's insistence that she knew her attacker, Badgerow was dropped as a suspect, and the case, like Diane's, went cold. 17 years later, no suspect has been arrested for the murder of Diane Werendowicz. Police revisited her case as well as the cold cases of several rapes that had been committed in the area around the same time. The rapist in those cases was described as 20 to 25 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, with dark feathered hair and a mustache. The Ravine Rapist Task Force asked the public for help, bringing Diane's murder back into the public eye, releasing the audio of the 911 call and hinting that advances in DNA science could finally help track down her killer. It was at this time that Robert Badgerow called his brother-in-law, a police officer who worked homicide. Badgerow told his brother-in-law, Randy Kovacic, that he had had a one-night stand with an unknown woman the night that Diane Werendowicz was killed. Badreau asked his brother-in-law what if the woman he slept with was Diane. Kovacic replied, "If it was you, you must be about the unluckiest guy in the world." The Ravine Rapist Task Force eventually narrowed their search down to two possibilities: Robert Badreau or a convicted rapist named Brian Miller who lived in Diane's apartment building. Miller had the rep sheet and a connection to the victim, but when police visited him in prison and took a DNA sample, it did not match the semen on Diane's body. Meanwhile, a police officer watched Badreau eat a bowl of soup at Tim Hortons. When he left, she took the spoon in for testing. It was a match. Robert Badreau also matched the description of the Ravine Rapist, early 20s, 5'8", dark feathered hair, and a mustache. In 1998, a full 17 years after the death of Diane Werendowicz, Robert Badreau was positively identified as the source of the semen found on her body. He was arrested. Badreau told police that he had met Diane as she was leaving the bar that night in 1981. The two of them began talking and then shared a joint before having consensual sex in his truck. Badreau claimed that Diane then left and he went home to his fiancée without ever learning Diane's name. When Badreau went to trial in 2001, the prosecution fought to have the screwdriver attack on Debbie Robertson admitted into evidence, but the judge ruled that there were not enough similarities in the case. It didn't end up mattering. Multiple people came forward to say that they believed it was Robert Badreau's voice on the 911 call, including Robert Badreau's brother-in-law, Randy Kovacic. Combined with the semen and the uncorroborated story about the one-night stand which seemed against Diane's character, the jury came back with a verdict of guilty. Robert Badreau was given a life sentence. If that was the whole story, we might have forgotten Robert Badreau by now. But like most people sentenced to life, Badreau filed an appeal. And unlike in most cases, it worked. 7 years into his sentence, the Court of Appeals ruled that the videotape of Badreau's police interrogation should have been admissible in court due to his lack of access to legal counsel. The interrogation tape was thrown out and a new trial was ordered. This time, the case resulted in a hung jury. A third trial was automatically triggered, and the result was yet another hung jury. At this point, the murder charge against Badreau was stayed. A judge decided that the accused had been through enough and that the judicial process had been served, and that Badreau was a free man. After 3 trials, Robert Badreau went home. He told this to a reporter from the Hamilton Spectator.
It's been a roller coaster of emotions from start to finish, and it's been 12 years, and what I would like to do is just move on, put this behind me. My sympathies and everything for the family. I'm sure they don't want my sympathies, but I still send them. And it's been 12 years, and I just like to move on and have the end of it, put it behind me.
Unfortunately for Robert Badreau, Crown Attorney Cheryl Gazik was not willing to give up. She had prosecuted Badreau at all 3 trials and was now willing to take the fight all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. The court agreed that there were grounds for another prosecution of Robert Badreau. A record-setting 4th trial was ordered, the first ever in Canada's history of first-degree murder cases. But this wasn't the only thing that the Supreme Court decided. The court also ruled that previous judges had made an error by not allowing jurors to know the result of the 1981 police trace of that infamous 911 call. The results of that trace had been ruled inadmissible for 3 trials, but now it would be presented in court. The jury that assembled for Robert Badreau's final trial, held in 2016, was able to learn something previous juries had not. That 911 call, the one made by Diane Werendowicz's killer, had been traced to Gate 6 of Dofasco, just meters away from where Robert Badreau worked. Robert Badreau's defense maintained the same story that they had told all along, that Robert Badreau really was the most unlucky man on the planet. They argued that the sex he had with Diane was consensual, that it was a coincidence she was killed after their one-night stand, that the similarity in voice to the phone call was just a result of suggestion, and that the location of the phone booth was just bad luck. But the jury didn't buy it. and in 2016, Robert Badgerow was once again found guilty and sentenced to death. He has since appealed that conviction, but the appeal was dismissed. Debbie Robertson continues to look for justice. Robert Badgerow eventually went on trial for her attack, but the case was dismissed. Too many witnesses had died in the intervening years, and crucial evidence had gone missing. To this day, justice has not been served for Debbie Robertson or the 10 other victims of the Ravine rapist. And to this day, Robert Badgerow maintains his innocence. Thanks for watching Beyond Crime. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support more true crime content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. We'll see you soon.